Come along with me for some much needed garden chores. From far away, the garden actually looks pretty decent, as long as we don't look too closely. Some plants are doing well, some are barely hanging on, and some have clearly given up altogether. Whenever I get to the garden, the first thing I do is assess the situation, or more accurately, assess the damage. Some of the tomato plants are beginning to die off, and we have a few dead plants laying around. I'm not even sure how this one ended up here, but clearly it didn't walk over by itself. These tomato flowers weren't properly pollinated, so they dried up and fell off without producing fruit. Then we have this poor little tomato that decided to grow directly between two pieces of wire. Over here we have our black trim tomatoes. These are heirloom tomatoes, and they're some of the most delicious tomatoes we grow. Unfortunately, a squirrel or rat seems to agree. This squash started off really well, but now it's dying. We have some more tomato plants struggling over here, including this one lying on the ground looking about halfway gone. And then there are the beans. These plants are pretty much finished for the season. The corn looks pretty sad too, but surprisingly, the ears are doing much better than we expected. Now that we finished admiring all the damages, let's get to work. We'll start by trimming away the dead and dying leaves and branches. Removing unhealthy growth helps improve airflow, makes the garden look cleaner, and allows us to see what's actually happening underneath all of this. And look what was hiding under these flowers. A zucchini! Unfortunately, powdery mildew has already done quite a bit of damage, so I'm going to remove the leaves that are heavily infested. Powdery mildew is that white dusty coating you often see on squash leaves. A small amount can sometimes be managed, but once it becomes severe, the plant can really struggle. This particular garden bed became a bit of an experiment. We originally planted vegetables here, zucchini, potatoes, and peppers. Then we forgot about some of them and planted flowers in the same bed. Now the flowers and vegetables are all competing for space, sunlight, water, and neither group is doing especially well. We're going to thin out some of the flowers and give the vegetables a little more room to take over, hoping that will at least give us some vegetables. In this bed, we have a whole group of volunteer tomato plants. These grew from tomatoes or seeds that were left behind from a previous season. Normally, I would pull out most of them because volunteer tomatoes can overcrowd a bed, but since so many of our tomato plants are dying, I'm going to leave these for now. At this point, I'd rather have surprise tomatoes than no tomatoes. There are weeds everywhere, so I'm going to pull out as many as possible. Some of these technically aren't weeds, but they're growing where we don't want them, and that's usually enough to earn them the title. We heavily mulched the garden pathway, but weeds still manage to find their way through. Mulch doesn't completely stop them, but it has made a huge difference. There are nowhere near as many weeds as there used to be. Some of these weeds may already have seeds on them, so I'm not going to add them to the compost. I don't want to turn the compost pile into a future weed nursery. Instead, they're going into a separate pile and will eventually be thrown away. Moving on to the raspberry bed. And the raspberries aren't especially happy either. The weather has been strange lately, but that's gardening. We work with what we have and try to make the best of it. There's also a little cucumber plant growing in here. It looks healthy enough, so I'll leave it and see what happens. It's easy to admire those gardens that always look perfect, green, lush, organized, and spotless. Ours doesn't always look like that, as much as we would love for it to. A lot of it comes down to time. There's only so much time available to spend in the garden, and sometimes things get overgrown and neglected, and that's okay. We don't need a perfect garden. We just keep doing it when we can, whenever we can. This zucchini plant also needs to come out. It's heavily infested with powdery mildew, and once the infection becomes this severe, it's difficult to bring the plant back. At this stage, removing it is the better option so the damage doesn't continue to nearby plants. And of course, we have more weeds. There are weeds everywhere today. As I'm pulling out the plants, I'm also checking their roots because this garden has a problem with root knot nematodes. Root knot nematodes are microscopic worms that live in the soil and attack plant roots. They cause swollen knots to form along the roots. These damaged roots can't absorb water and nutrients properly, so the plants may become stunned, turn yellow, wilt easily, and produce very little, even when they're being watered and fertilized. paralyzed. They're one of the most difficult garden pests to manage because they live in the soil where we can't easily see or reach them. We've been dealing with them for a while, so every time a plant is removed, we inspect the roots carefully. Any roots showing signs of nematode damage go into a separate pile and then into trash. And we never add infested roots or plants to the compost because we don't want to risk spreading the nematodes back into the garden. There's still so much work to do, but now let's check on the corn. We were really worried about this corn patch. The plants weren't looking good at all, and they've been dealing with both spider mites and corn earworms. But once we looked more closely, we realized that quite a few ears were ready to harvest. Despite all the problems this corn has been through, the harvest was much better than expected. Apparently, the corn didn't come with the memo that it was supposed to fail. There is still plenty of cleaning and plenty of garden work left for another day. We probably won't finish everything today, but that's okay. A little progress is always better than no progress. And after spending so much time talking about pests, diseases, dying plants, weeds, and everything else going wrong, let's end on a good note. Despite all the problems in the garden, we still managed to bring home an amazing harvest. We harvested orange tomatoes, large tomatoes, small tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes, potatoes, basil, parsley, pepper, leeks, carrots, beets, corn, flowers, onions, cucumbers, red leaf lettuce, lemons, avocados, and grapes. Looking at everything together, it's hard to believe it all came from the garden that seemed to be struggling so much. Harvests like this remind us why we keep going. The garden doesn't have to look perfect to be productive. There will always be pests, diseases, weather problems, weeds, and plants that simply don't make it. But mixed in with all those challenges are surprises, lessons, and baskets full of fresh food. So we'll clean up what we can today, come back for the rest another time, and keep growing.